coming up on The Cost of Living.
I'm not opposed to someone having debt if they have the ability to work towards paying it off and are saving and have kind of a financial management plan. But when there's debt and no financial management plan, that's where there's a deal breaker for me.
CJ Harriman isn't a financial planner or a banker assessing client risk, but she is doing a complex evaluation of who she wants to date. Hi, I'm Paul Haberstrood. Welcome to The Cost of Living. On this show, we love love. People in the dating scene do too. That, a steady paycheck, and a solid credit score. At least if you want a second date. Also today, insurance companies can't stop the extreme weather we're seeing. The floods, hurricanes, wildfires. But with the number of claims rising, could they have a plan that will hold down the cost of our premiums? Up first, in November's US election, Canada is technically a bystander. But if a certain tariff man wins, our bystanding days could feel like a fond memory. Ryan Jordan owns a small steel fabrication shop. They make stuff like railings for office buildings. He's in Windsor, so he gets jobs on both sides of the border. So, what was it like back in 2018 when President Trump brought in a 25% tariff on Canadian steel?
There were projects that were put on hold because the client decided we're not going to go ahead with this because we didn't expect the cost of steel to be this much. So we found that there were 25% of the clients refused to carry ahead with the projects, which meant we weren't doing the work. The general contractor wasn't doing the work, and the owner, the building owner, was going to wait.
But Ryan, he couldn't afford to wait. He didn't want to lay anyone off, but business was drying up. So he made a choice. He got into copper, church steeples, restoring heritage buildings. He'd spent 20 years running a steel shop. Suddenly, he needed to figure out where to get copper. He had to go to Europe to find it. He had to retrain his crew, find new customers, buy equipment.
Yeah, I spoke to my accountant about this, and he says, Ryan, are you sure you're getting into a different material here? I said, well, what else am I going to do? I can't just rely on steel at this point where people are turning down these jobs because of the cost.
RJ Steel is now RJ Steel and Copper. It took some doing, but business is good. Whether it stays that way could depend on who wins the U.S. election. Our relationship with the U.S. is often called special. But former Canadian Ambassador Alan Gottlieb also once said, in Washington, Canada is just another special interest. And not a very special one at that. If Kamala Harris wins in November, our special relationship could stay fairly special. She hasn't given many trade policy specifics. She'll probably keep up President Biden's low-key trade war with China. We could get dragged further into that. But for our two countries, a Kamala win is expected to be more business as usual. A Trump win? Now that could be anything but. On the campaign trail, he's back on one of his favorite subjects, tariffs.
A tariff is a tax on a foreign country. That's the way it is, whether you like it or not. A lot of people like to say, oh, it's a tax on us. No. It's a tax on a foreign country. It's a tax on a country that's ripping us off and stealing our jobs.
Trump is now threatening a global tariff of 10 to 20%. That would apply to all U.S. imports, including stuff from Canada. Anything from China? Make it 60%. Now, Canada does $1 trillion a year in cross-border trade. That's nearly 10 times more than we do with any other country. We can hope this is all just big talk, but what if it's not?
He doesn't have many policies. This is one of them. He did this his last time. He's been talking about this for decades. So this is very much, in Donald Trump's milieu.
Brendan Duke is the economic policy director of the Center for American Progress. Now, threatening to disrupt the global trading order? That's no joke. But Brendan says this isn't just Trump being a loose cannon. His ideas are backed, in part, by people who are suddenly making a name for themselves, like Oren Cass, the founder of a new think tank, American Compass.
So Oren Cass is, a former Mitt Romney economic advisor who has started a think tank that is, on the right, but tries to, talk about economic policy from a different frame than Republicans traditionally have.
Traditionally, Republicans have been like, yeah, more growth, more trade, cheaper for consumers. Brendan says this shift towards trade protectionism, economic nationalism, it's different, and it's rooted in a couple of ideas.
The first one is this is going to create good American jobs and protect them, and the U.S. economy and workers will benefit from that protection. Then there's a second idea, which is this is going to raise a ton of money, and that can help with the deficit, that can help pay for tax cuts on American producers.
You'll notice he didn't say anything about the consumer. People like Oren Cass think the worker should come first. Protect American jobs, workers will have good paychecks, and voila, a lot of problems solved. Only economists like Brendan don't see the voila. They just see more problems. Sure, the U.S. has a huge domestic market of 330 million people, but that doesn't necessarily mean it can go it alone.
There's only one U.S. state that produces coffee. It's Hawaii. It will never produce enough coffee to satiate American coffee demand. For various reasons, even though we're a net oil exporter, we import oil from other countries, including Canada. So, I think all of these reasons why, that would make us poor.
So what would happen if Trump does bring in a 10% global tariff? Well, first, other countries would retaliate with their own tariffs, just like Canada did with steel. That would make everything more expensive, and those higher costs, they'd then get passed on to the consumer.
If there's one thing we've learned over the last 4 years is Americans don't particularly love inflation. This would be hugely unpopular, and, that would be what it would be, and they would have to reckon with that.
And this idea of a global tariff isn't occurring in a vacuum. Tariffs are part of the same line of thinking as pulling back from NATO, that America is better off alone. And if it takes a few lumps getting there, so be it.
They want to have a rude jolt to their economy and to put it into a very different space, one in which America is much more self-sufficient.
Dan Suryak is the head of Suryak Consulting and a former deputy chief economist for Canada's Trade Department. If Trump does take a Fortress America approach to trade, Dan says that rude jolt would quickly rattle through the rest of the world.
The risk of global recession from this kind of protectionism, biting into highly complex productions, globalized production system that we have, it would be very real.
To understand how a U.S. tariff would hit the global economy, Dan says look no further than what happened with steel. Canada's steel industry grew up alongside the U.S. A free and easy trading relationship meant companies on both sides of the border could specialize in what they did well. But when the tariffs came in,
all of a sudden, there was a scramble to reshuffle the markets, to broaden the production of things that, so that we would be more self-contained. And that was painful. And actually what you saw happen was that companies just wound up paying the tariff, and Canada continued to ship into the United States. It didn't stop production that used steel. It just made it more cumbersome and complicated.
So the economy won't grind to a halt. Ryan Jordan and RJ Steele made it through the steel tariffs, but it was rocky. Now think about that hitting the entire economy. Beef, lumber, everything else we trade. Over time, higher trade costs would push Canadian companies to be more self-contained. But doing every step of everything yourself can get expensive. And for an economy, it would throw more than a little sand in the gears.
The whole benefit of specialization is productivity, is efficiency. So we suffer an efficiency cost of several percentage points of GDP. And that is ultimately what's going to happen. Alongside the bumps in the road and the turbulence that would result with companies losing contracts, companies moving their operations to the U.S., we still have produced pretty much everything. There's still a certain amount of trade, but ultimately we face lower incomes.
Dan says a blanket global tariff would radically reshape global trade. So, could something like this actually happen? Well, Trump in the White House could pull it off, but it wouldn't come without a fight.
Some will profit, many will not, and you will have resistance. I think it's just very hard to undo an omelet that we have in North America with this kind of a simplistic policy. So it can't work, so it won't work.
We still don't know exactly what a global tariff would look like, or if Canada could be exempt. And there are so many more ifs. Who will win the election? And if it's Trump, will he really follow through? He can be a bit of a big talker Betty Crocker. But that doesn't mean he won't try it. On your Radio and by podcast, this is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Habershrud. How do I love thee? Let me count your assets? Looking for the one may not be quite as romantic as it used to be. As our producer Ellis Cho finds, more Gen Zs and millennials are choosing financial math over chemistry.
CJ Harriman was looking for love.
Yeah, so I met this guy online and he had a very nice profile. I mean, it was interesting, nice photos.
He was funny and handsome.
The table. So I, of course, was very smitten right off the bat.
Things were going great until she found out that
he didn't have a credit card. I felt like it was a red flag of maybe deeper financial trouble.
She was right. He was deep in debt.
I'm not opposed to someone having debt if they have the ability to work towards paying it off and are saving and have kind of a financial management plan. But when there's debt and no financial management plan, that's where there's a deal breaker for me.
For a lot of people on the dating scene these days, money is top of mind. According to a recent U.S. study by Northwestern Mutual, nearly half of Gen Zs and millennials say financial compatibility is more important than physical attraction. And just over a quarter of them believe honest conversations about money should happen before getting serious.
Part of me, the financial planner and the money geek in me, is going, yahoo, it's about time. Because it's just so awesome that people are talking about their money and looking for someone who is simpatico with their money.
Janet Gray is a certified financial planner with Money Coaches Canada. She says the cost of living is forcing young people to think about the financial prospects of their dating prospects. Because in the end, money affects everything.
You know, do I have children? Do I buy a house? Do I try to buy a house? You know, do I have to work 5 jobs? Can I only work 1? Like, I think there's a lot on them.
Finances can put a lot of stress on a relationship. So Janet says it's important to be upfront about money sooner rather than later. Now, maybe it's unromantic to swap credit scores on your first date, but
divorces are unromantic also. I see a lot of people later saying, you know, if I'd known that this was going to happen, I might have made a different choice.
Choosing money over chemistry isn't new. Yuthika Garame says economics and marriage always went hand in hand, until only recently.
What happened in about like the 1960s was we had the sort of love revolution that people started to not just marry for money. They really prioritized wanting someone that they had physical chemistry with.
Garame is a psychology professor at Simon Fraser University who studies relationships. She says Gen Zs and millennials don't have that luxury of being hopeless romantics.
And so I think what we're seeing with the younger generation is that they're sort of reverting back potentially to some of what we thought about when making decisions about who to look for in a partner.
That may be why a dating app popped up recently, matching singles with great credit scores. As for CJ Harriman, she ended up dumping that guy with all the debt and found someone she really clicks with.
We both like bowling. We both like golfing. We have very kind of similar family goals and family relationships. And so we bring those kind of soft qualities to the relationship, but also some tangible stuff that really makes a difference for setting up our foundation together. Yes, like money.
For The Cost of Living, I'm Ellis Cho.
Just want to let you know, if you happen to miss the show on the radio, feel free to check out our podcast. It drops Friday nights. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. And if, you just can't get enough of the show, you can find all of our old episodes there. It's just like watching repeats of Friends. So yeah, on your radio and by podcast, this is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Havershrud. So, Danielle Nerman, we were chatting the other day, and you were saying you're thinking about getting a doorbell camera.
Yes. My family has talked about putting one in, and why we're doing it is because it's all me. I really like the idea of snooping on my own house.
What exactly do you think is happening there?
I don't know. That's the point. Like, funny business could be going on, and if that's happening, I want to know about it. That's why Viviana Moran got her Porch cam. She has an app where she can watch the video feed, and a couple months ago,
my phone dings and it goes off, and I look and I see someone at my house, and I'm like, what is going on?
Viviana lives in Fort McMurray, and it's been a pretty dry summer, which is not good for wildfires. Back in May, one fire got out of control and her whole neighborhood was evacuated. So she packs up and leaves, and not long after, she checks her porch cam and sees some guy walking around her yard.
I thought he was a looter, to be honest. I thought someone was breaking in and trying to take stuff. But I was like, that's so odd. I'm like, he's moving my two plants. He moved my chairs and everything off my front deck.
So she was a little confused.
But she wasn't being robbed.
No. After the evacuation was lifted and she went home, Viviana found a letter in her mailbox. It said her home had been fireproofed by Wildfire Defense Systems.
And who are they?
They're like a wildfire SWAT team.
We can set up water tanks if we need to, sprinkler systems, portable sprinkler systems, and really harden that property for the 2 to 10 minutes that it's going to take for a wildfire to get through.
Scott Esquit is with Wildfire Defense Systems, or WDS. He says when a fire is less than 5 kilometers away, his guys swoop in.
But they're not firefighters.
They don't fight fires. WDS's focus is last-minute fire prevention for homeowners. Crews will trim trees and shrubs and move things that are combustible, like patio furniture, away from your home. Because when a wildfire is out of control, what's really dangerous are the hot embers that get blown around in the wind. If even one lands on your doormat, it could burn your house down.
We are in a position to break the chain of wildfire events so that when a resident leaves their property because they are being evacuated, there's a better chance that then when they come back, their home's still going to be standing.
So who's paying this crew?
They work for insurance companies. WDS has been in the U.S. for decades, but this is their first summer in Canada.
And someone like Viviana, she didn't even know they existed until they're out there moving around her Adirondacks.
No. And this wasn't a thing back in 2016 when that huge fire ripped through Fort Mac.
Now, I get the concept, which is amazing. I get what they're trying to do.
But this time, the fire didn't reach her neighborhood. So when she came back home,
I came into a huge disaster, a huge mess, and a lot of my belongings were destroyed.
That doesn't seem cool.
No, WDS is supposed to come back and clean up. But this kind of work can be rushed and chaotic. If we take a step back, though, and look at what insurance companies are doing, this is about loss mitigation. They want to keep homes from burning down.
Because if that happens, that's when the big payouts happen for the insurance companies.
Exactly. According to the Insurance Bureau of Canada, in the last decade, Canadian insurers paid out about $6 billion in wildfire claims. And that cost, it trickles down to all of us. Anne Kleffner teaches insurance and risk management at the University of Calgary's Haskayne School of Business.
Even if I don't have a loss, even if you don't have a loss, right, the whole idea is the collective pays for the loss. So as the cost of fires and floods and hail has gone up, it has put a lot of upward pressure on premiums.
In the last year, premiums across Canada went up 10%. Anne says if the insurance industry just sits back and does nothing, they'll just keep rising.
The natural disaster situation is not going to change. So if they can keep it from going up a lot by doing this kind of wildfire mitigation, then it doesn't necessarily mean they'll go down, but it will help prevent them going up further or more rapidly.
So the idea here is climate change is creating more extreme weather and wildfires. So if they can stop houses from burning down, that's fewer claims and then fewer costs across the whole system.
Yes. And like Anne said, insurance is a team game. Wherever you are in the country, fewer claims is a good thing for your insurance costs. This is why insurers are shelling out millions to help communities become more resilient to catastrophic weather. It's also why they pay for cloud seeding.
They pay for cloud seeding?
Yeah, smaller hailstones mean fewer dents in your car. But none of that does anything for my garden. It just gets shredded.
You do love your tomato plants.
I do.
But, obviously insurance companies here, they have a financial interest in keeping the number of claims down. So these wildfire crews, are they helping or are they doing that?
This year was just a pilot, so we don't know yet. But WDS was deployed to at least half a dozen wildfires in BC and Alberta, including Jasper. Greg Van Tegem lives there. He's the town's former fire chief. He says when a wildfire is looming, firefighters, they actually already go from house to house and move tires and wood piles into driveways. But it's really time consuming. He says if WDS can take that work on, it could help.
I do like the idea because it is a job that needs to be done, and it can free up the firefighters to do more things with water and hoses and sprinklers.
But Greg does see one big burning hole in their strategy.
And that is?
WDS works for insurance companies, but not every Canadian insurance company is using this kind of wildfire outfit.
Well, you've only got one client on this street, so you're just doing the mitigation for one person. The other 17 houses on the block aren't getting that treatment. So if you do get an ignition on one structure, then most likely you're going to get multiple houses lighting up. And it's impossible then. It doesn't matter if your house is made out of concrete with a metal roof. If you get in that situation, it's going to burn.
So what he's saying is if you don't do this for everyone, it may not work. However, Canada's largest home insurance provider, Intact, used WDS this summer, and so did Aviva and Definity.
So how much is this costing their customers?
Nothing.
Really?
Yeah, they say it's free for now.
Yeah, but that's like free in quotation marks.
Sure, but what they're doing is making a calculation. They're waiting to see, can they save money in the long run by spending money on this kind of prevention? And there's a lot at stake here. If claims keep ballooning, insurance could stop covering some people in high-risk areas. Right now, 1.5 million homes can't get flood insurance.
And they want to insure as many people as possible, and people want to be insured. So this whole wildfire prevention thing, it's like hoping that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Exactly. But you know what I'd like insurance to do for me?
What?
I want a garden SWAT team. Swoop down and cover my flower pots when it hails.
And your tomatoes?
Actually, I have umbrellas for that.
Oh, you're prepared. Thanks, Danielle.
You're welcome.
That's all for the show. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. Coming up next week, meet a woman who is moving to the UK so she can buy a house. Or at least part of one. Could shared ownership make housing more affordable in Canada? That's next week. The show is produced by Danielle Nerman, Ellis Cho, and Jennifer Keene, with help from Caroline Ferris. I'm Paul Haversrud. Thanks for listening.